Alright, how's everybody doing today? Back again with another video for you guys. And today, what I have for everyone is my versus / comparison video between the Moto G5 Plus and the Blu Life One X2. Just brought this one back in the house. Been using these side by side for about a day. And you know, I figured, man, these guys are similar and so different. Why not hit them up with a comparison video for you guys, so you guys can see the differences, you can see the similarities, we could talk about the price, all that good stuff. Now, in the interest of speed, I've decided to not talk about certain things, so it might be a little bit shorter video, but also I've included more information in other areas. So I just wanted to point that out. For full in-depth information on either of these devices, as well as the photo and the video samples, first, please check out the full reviews, which will be linked down below, as well as links to the camera samples and all that good stuff. As well as, please follow me on Google Plus if you want to see the photo samples for each of these guys. So check that out, you know. Alright, just wanted to point that out. Now, jumping right in, the first thing I want to talk about with you guys is the build quality and the design on both devices. Let's start with the Blu Life One X2. I'm just going to call it the X2 from now on, because that name's a little bit of a mouthful, and this will be the G5 Plus. Now, starting off with the build quality, I have to say, hold on, let me turn the screen off real quick. I have to say that Blu did a good job on this one. There's no rattling or creaking of any kind. It actually feels very solid in the hands, and the buttons, they have a nice press to them. Now it's not very clicky, but it is a very nice press, so that's pretty good. And there's no rattling or creaking of any kind, except for if you press on the right spot on the back plate, you will hear it. A little bit of creak there, and that's because this back plate is removable, so you have access to your micro SD card and your micro SIM card trays. And this bad boy is hell to get off, so please be prepared if you pick up this phone. Just want to point that out. Other than that, the build quality on this guy is really good, and as well as the design. It's very simple, sleek, and straightforward. It's really nice. So the build quality on the Blu Life One X2 is good, or the X2 is good. Next, let's talk about the build quality on the Moto G5 Plus, henceforth the G5 Plus. Now, again, you're going to hear some similarities and some differences. In terms of the build quality on the G5 Plus, I have to say that Motorola, now Lenovo, did a great job. There's no rattling or creaking of any kind, and the buttons are very tactile and clicky. And you actually hear a nice reassuring click to it, and it's actually very tactile and responsive. So in terms of build quality, the G5 Plus is really, really good. Really good. And again, in terms of design, they did a really good job with this one. It's very sleek and straightforward and very eye-catching. But the one downside to the design on this is that they got rid of the Motorola dimple. It doesn't feel the same as on maybe the G4 Plus or the Moto X Pure Edition. Now it kind of feels like, you know, it was just painted on there, or they just threw a sticker on there and then painted it the color that was supposed to be. So it feels kind of cheap. As well as they have a metal back plate now with plastic top and bottom. I'm assuming that that's for antenna purposes and reception purposes. But that metal back plate, along with these sides, make this device very slippery in the hands, and you're definitely going to want to pick up a case. Keep in mind, this is all in my opinion, but in my opinion, you're definitely going to want to pick up a case for this. But other than that, the build quality and design on the G5 Plus is actually really, really good. So across the board, I'd have to say when it comes to build quality and design on both of these devices, they pretty much are a tie, and the build quality and design of both of these devices are really, really good. Again, they do have their caveats, so keep that in mind. Alright, next, let's talk about the displays on these guys. Let's start with the X2. So up front, dead center here, you have a 5.2 inch 1080p IPS LCD display. And I have to tell you guys, it's a really, really solid display. And I've had no issues with the display. And for those of you who want to see the raw numbers here, let me let that focus. Now, some of the information in CPU-Z is correct and other stuff is not. So I just want to point that out. I'll point out the corrections wherever applicable. So as you can see, if you want to know the actual numbers, it is in fact a 5.2 inch 1080p display. Even though it says 13.77 inches, that's not correct. It is 1080p, and the screen density is actually 424, where it says 160. So that is not correct. Just wanted to point that out for you guys. But in terms of day-to-day usage, putting the numbers aside, in terms of using it day-to-day, I have to say that it really is a really, really good display. Really good display. And if you do need to crank the brightness, this is where I tend to keep it on a daily basis. If you do need to crank the brightness, it does in fact get very, very bright. As you can see there, as it throws the exposure on the camera for a loop there. Let's dial that back down. But in terms of day-to-day, I had no issue seeing it outdoors, and it actually gets fairly bright whenever I need to crank it. So the display on the X2 is really, really good. Next, let's talk about the display on the G5 Plus. So again, up front, dead center here, we have another 5.2 inch 1080p IPS LCD display. Alright, and again, in terms of displays, I would have to say that the display on this one is really, really good as well. And again, keep in mind, CPU-Z does have its mistakes, so I'll point out the corrections. So if you want to see the raw numbers on the display, there it is. It's actually a 5.2 inch 1080p display, and the screen density is 424. Alright, just so y'all can see that. But in terms of displays, again, in day-to-day usage, I have to say that the display on the G5 Plus is actually really, really good. And again, if you need to crank the brightness, it does get really, really bright, which y'all saw where I tend to keep it on a daily basis, right about right there. So, in terms of displays, I'd have to say it's a really, really good display. Alright, so that being said, you guys may be wondering, in terms of displays, who won what? And honestly, guys, again, I'm going to have to say, in terms of displays, wherever displays are concerned, y'all know me. I tend, if it's a good display, I'm going to tell you it's a good display. Putting all the numbers and resolutions and screen densities aside, a good display is a good display. And I'm going to have to tell you, both the displays on both of these devices are very good, in my opinion. Now, that's personal preference. Some of y'all may want that more pixel dense display, that bigger display, the more higher resolution display. But to me, a good display is a good display. So across the board, I'm going to have to call this a tie in the display department. Both very, very good 1080p displays on both of these devices. Oh, and I also want to point out, I know you may see some differences from the full reviews on these guys. I pretty much got addicted to the layout on the G5 Plus, so I kind of mimicked that layout on all of my devices using Nova Launcher and some icon packs. So now across all of my devices, it's a more uniform setup and a more uniform look. So regardless of whatever device I decided to pick up and use for today, they're all going to be set up the same. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, keeping it moving, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the hardware and the software on these guys. Now, for some more visual reference, I'm going to pull up the actual numbers so you guys can see before we actually jump in to the hardware and give y'all a little bit of a tour around. So, because, you know, I feel like some of y'all want to see the actual numbers here. So, in terms of the G5 Plus, internally it has a Snapdragon 625 processor. That's an octa-core processor, clocked at 2.2 gigahertz, and an Adreno 506 GPU. It actually doesn't want to scroll up now, but that actually has an Adreno 506 GPU down there. Alright? Now, other internals. In terms of internals, it has 2 gigs of RAM, and you can see how much RAM is actually available right there. And it has 32 gigs of onboard storage, and again, you can see how much RAM, how much storage is actually available right there. Other things, just wanted to get that out the way. Other things, it has a 12 megapixel dual focus camera, which is capable of 4K video recording at 30 frames a second, 1080p 60, 1080p 30, 720p slow motion at 120 frames. Okay? And it does have a 3000 milliamp hour battery with turbocharge. Alright? Other things. Up front here, it has a 5 megapixel camera, which is capable of 1080p video recording at 30 frames a second, and 480p slow motion at 120 frames. Then you have your dual front, your single front firing speaker. Sorry guys, your proximity and light sensors for your motor display, and that front facing speaker also doubles as your receiver. So that's that. Then you have your 5.2 inch IPS LCD 1080p display and your fingerprint scanner. Okay? That does it for the hardware. Now let's jump over to the hardware on the X2. Now, in terms of hardware on the X2, this guy is running a Snapdragon 430 processor. Again, that's an octa-core processor with 2 cores, with 2 sets of 8 cores, clocked at 1.4 gigahertz, and it's running an Adreno 505 GPU. Other internals, it also has 2 gigs of RAM, and then this one has 16 gigs of onboard storage. But both these guys do have micro SD card expansion, so let me shout that out. And then you can see the available storage on both of these guys. So out of 16 gigs, you see you get about 9 there. So, alright, other hardware. On the rear, you have a 16 megapixel camera, which is capable of 1080p video recording. Alright, and I don't remember if this one has slow-mo. I don't believe so. It may have. No, I don't believe it has slow motion. So it's only 1080p video recording there. Alright, then up front here, you have your 8 megapixel front facing camera, which is only capable of 720p video recording. Then you got your 5.2 inch IPS LCD 1080p display and a front facing flash as well right there. Then below that you have your fingerprint sensor. Okay? Alright, so that pretty much does it for the hardware on both of these devices. Now, jumping back over to the G5 Plus, let's talk about the software in here. Alright, so now, in terms of software on the G5 Plus, you are running pretty much a stock version of Android 7.0 Nougat with Motorola's custom features thrown in. So everything is stock except for the Motorola widgets there. And you can see it's got the stock 7.0 layout. So you can do all of the 7.0 features. Now check out my full review if you want to know more about these 7.0 features. But it's pretty much stock 7.0 Android Nougat with Motorola's custom features thrown in. So what does that mean? You have your twist to launch the camera. Alright. And then you could twist again to get to the front. Then you got your chop for the flashlight. Alright, so you can do that. Bam. Alright. Then you have your Moto display, as you can see right there. So that's that. And then in terms of features now, usually I go over the whole feature set, but those are pretty much the ones that I use on a regular basis. So now in terms of features, I'm pretty much just going to be calling out the features that I found useful on a regular basis there. So that's pretty much it when it comes to the features. Just wanted to point that out for you guys. Alright? Now next, jumping over to the X2. Again, it's a similar experience. Now it looks a little bit differently when it's stock, but I've set it up to be a more similar experience. This one is running Android 6.0 Marshmallow, and this one also has adaptable storage. And you have pretty much all of your Marshmallow features. And pretty much the big one for Marshmallow was the adaptable storage. And pretty much other than that, the only other useful feature that I use in this one is that Blu has incorporated a more useful screenshot feature, so I can get more of the screen in a shot, and that is very useful in my opinion. Other than that, you do have your double press to launch the camera. That's also nice. I also use that very much on a regular basis. So now, in terms of software, guys, you guys may be wondering, how do I feel about it on both devices? And really, I'm going to tell y'all, it's a very fluid and fast experience on both devices, especially even more fluid and fast now that I set them up to be a more uniformed experience. So it's very fluid, very fast, and very responsive, and I had no issues with the software on either devices, except for with the G5 Plus here. I did have some camera crashes. I did have some reboots, and I'm still having some. Okay, there are some focus hunting issues in the camera. I did notice that, and there is a 4K 10 minutes and 38 seconds recording limit in the camera. So I just wanted to point that out. And then again, there's that occasional app slowdown with a bunch of apps open in the background. Alright, then over here on the X2, pretty much again, it's been a very fluid and enjoyable experience, with some exceptions. Now, the one big exception that I have on this one, everything else I can work with, is the fact that the fingerprint scanner does not work to launch some of my more important apps, like my banking app and like PayPal or things of that nature. Now, it is there in the settings, but once I set it up, it doesn't work. It just wants me to keep resetting it up. So that's the only issue that I have with the software in terms of the X2. Other than that, you get your occasional app slowdown with a ton of apps open in the background. Now, keep in mind, guys, for more information, please check out my full reviews on both devices, which will be linked down below. But other than that, I would have to say the software experience across both devices, in my opinion, is very, very good. So in terms of software, I'd have to say it's a tie. Now, I'm sure some of you guys may be saying, well, the G5 Plus is running the latest and the greatest, so you get more features. That's true. But when I talk about the software, I'm talking about the fluidity and the overall performance. And although there's a Android difference here, in terms of overall fluidity and performance, I'd have to say that they both are really, really good. So based on that, I'm going to have to call it a tie across the board when it comes to the software experience. Alright? And keep in mind, if you don't like your software experience, it's Android. So you can always throw on a custom launcher and get your custom icon packs and go crazy with it and make it really feel like your own device. So it is what it is there. Now next, let's keep it moving. Up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the Wi-Fi on these guys. Now let's start with the X2. Now in terms of Wi-Fi, the X2 has Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN. Alright? And really, this is where I would show y'all the Wi-Fi stats, but I've only had this one for about a day or so, so I haven't really cranked back up the Wi-Fi stats on this. But you guys know, if you check out my full review, y'all can see those stats. But in terms of overall Wi-Fi on this guy, I'd have to say that it's been really, really good, and I've had no issues. Now next, let's load up a YouTube video, and this way I can give y'all a live demonstration, and also y'all can get a sample of the speakers. Now, in the interest of speed, I usually do the speaker test at 50% volume and 100% volume. In the interest of speed, we're just going to go ahead and do it at 100% volume. So it's already set to 100. Let's put that off to the side. We're going to come back to that. Now, in terms of Wi-Fi on the G5 Plus, I have to say that the Wi-Fi on this guy is Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN, and it does have dual band, so you can take advantage of your 2.4 gigahertz band and your 5 gigahertz band. And all in all, I'd have to say the Wi-Fi on this guy has been really, really good, and I've had no issues with the Wi-Fi. Again, in terms of speed, we're just going to pull up a YouTube video here so you guys can see your live demonstration. Let me get rid of some of these notifications real quick. Clear these notifications out real quick. Sorry guys. And skip this ad. Alright. But again, in terms of Wi-Fi, it really is a really, really good experience. Now, again, in the interest of speed, I'm just going to play this one at 100% volume so you guys can hear how it sounds maxed out. Alright. So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, who we gonna start with? Yo, let's start with the G5 Plus. It's already in my hands. Alright, so I'm gonna be quiet now. I'm gonna scrub through some of the video. You guys enjoy the listening experience. Enjoy, guys. Alright, so that was the real quick Wi-Fi performance on the G5 Plus. Let's jump over to the X2. Here we go, guys. Enjoy. Alright, so real quick Wi-Fi test for you guys and a real nice speaker demonstration. Alright, so now you guys may be wondering, in terms of Wi-Fi, who wins? In terms of speakers, who wins? Now, in terms of Wi-Fi, I'd have to say it's a tie across the board. The Wi-Fi experience on both of these devices is very, very good. So in terms of performance, fluidity, day-to-day usage when it comes to the Wi-Fi, have no issues, and this really is a tie across the board. They're both very fluid, fast, and responsive. Now, in terms of speakers, you guys may be wondering who wins. Now, I'm going to have to give it hands down to the G5 Plus. because not only are the speakers located in the right spot on the front, and they are front firing, but it does get louder and it's clearer. Now, in terms of speakers on both of these devices, there's not too much bass. They do get very loud, but again, when it comes to the speaker on the X2, this down-firing one is extremely easy to muffle. So in terms of speakers, I'm going to have to give it to the G5 Plus. Alright, now let's keep it moving. Up next, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the LTE support and the bands supported in these guys. Now, just to make it a little bit easier so you guys know, I pulled up the bands so you guys could see there. And then let me pull this up over here on the G5 Plus. Alright. Jump back into it there. Expand this. Boom. So now, let's talk about the bands, guys. In terms of bands and day-to-day usage with LTE, I've had no issues on either device. No issues whatsoever. And whenever I had reception, it was actually a joy to use. Browsing the web, using Google Maps, anything that has to do with data and actual band support was beautiful on either device. Now, who wins in this department? I'd have to give it to the G5 Plus, because as y'all can see, the G5 Plus has bands and support for all major carriers in the United States and all GSM carriers around the world. So you can pretty much pop any SIM into this and it'll be good to go. It's pretty much plug and play on any carrier. So that's carriers like Sprint, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, and any of the MVNOs like Virgin, Metro, Cricket, so on and so forth. Alright? Whereas with the X2, this guy is a GSM unlocked phone. So it's really going to work on all the GSM carriers. So what is that? That's AT&T and T-Mobile and any of their MVNOs like Cricket and Metro PCS and so on and so forth. Those are pretty much the only two that I know off the top of my head for GSM carriers. But, so, sure, you take a little bit of a hit there because this is a GSM phone that only works on GSM carriers, whereas this one, the G5 Plus, works on pretty much every carrier. But still, it's a very plug and play experience on either device. Also, I do want to point out real quick because I did have this question. The X2 is not hot swappable. So when I say hot swappable, you cannot swap the SIMs or the SD card with the device on. It says it. If you remove the backplate, which I'm not going to do in this video because the backplate struggles is real, and y'all can see that in my how-to video on how to remove this backplate. If you remove the backplate, it does say, engraved on the back, device not hot swappable. So you do have to power off the device before you swap in the micro SD cards. Okay? If not, it's not going to recognize the micro SD card. Okay? Just wanted to point that out. Now, the G5 Plus, however, is hot swappable, similar to the Moto X Pure Edition. So you can leave the device powered on and swap out SIMs and micro SD cards. Now, when you have the SD card as internal storage, you will not be able to access that internal storage until you put it back in this phone. Okay? If you do put it in another phone, it's going to ask you, it's going to say that the SD card is corrupted and you're going to need to wipe the SD card, which will erase all of your data on it, your music files, your movies, so on and so forth. So when you do use adaptable internal storage, those SD cards will only read the data if you put it back in the phone that you set that up on. I also want to point that out. But it is hot swappable on the G5 Plus. Just wanted to point that out. Alright, so that does it for the LTE and band support on both of these guys. So now let's keep it moving. Up next I want to just talk about the Bluetooth on both of these. Now, Bluetooth wise, the X2 has Bluetooth 4.0 and the G5 Plus has Bluetooth 4.2. And in terms of Bluetooth on both of these devices, I have to say that it was a joy to use on either device. Okay? It was a joy to use. Alright? So no issues when it comes to Bluetooth on either device. Now, keeping it moving, let's talk about the GPS on both of these devices here. Now, in terms of GPS, guys, I have to say that the GPS on either device is really, really good. Now, I haven't had any issues with the GPS on either device, turn by turn, and pretty much anything that has to do with the GPS has been a very enjoyable experience. But just so y'all can see the actual numbers, pull it up right there. So if you're GPS dependent, much like myself, you should have an enjoyable experience on either device, and it locks on fairly quickly on either device and works without issue. So the GPS on either of these devices is really, really good. Alright? So now, let's keep it moving. Up next, let's talk about the receiver call quality and speaker call quality on both of these devices. And really, I'd have to say that it really is good on either device. In terms of receiver calls, I've had no issues. Wherever I had reception, calls came through loud, crisp, and clear.